is not what you know, it's what you can prove.
You know how to cut to the core of me, Baxter. You're so wise. You're like a miniature Buddha, covered in hair.
I want to become a guru so girls will like me. Then I will like myself.
Now, before we do this, let's go over the ground rules. Rule number 1. No touching of the hair or face.
Of course.
And that's it! Now let's do this!
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 138 of the Golf Guru Show. I'm your host, Jason Sutton, and I'm the Guru. I'm the Director of Instruction at the beautiful Colleton River Club in Bluffton, South Carolina, where it is my mission to break down high performers in the teaching and coaching business, as well as all fields of study. Make sure you download this episode and hit that purple subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future episodes that will be coming your way. All I ask is that you share the podcast on social and with other coaches and players that might benefit from the information. I have a very special episode this week as it is recorded in front of a live audience as we are at the Carolinas PGA Fall Teaching Summit in Pinehurst. My guest on this live show is my good friend Tim Cooke. Tim's been on the show a few years ago, so I would highly recommend checking out episode 64 as it was a really, really good one. Tim is a Golf Magazine Top 100 instructor, winner of the 2014 Carolinas Section Teacher of the Year, and is on the Golf Digest top instructor list for South Carolina as well. He is currently the Director of Instruction at the Sea Pines Golf Academy in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and specializes in working with elite juniors, high-level college players, and also has several players on the PGA, LPGA, Korn Ferry, and Epson Tour. So this guy really knows his stuff, and I'm very fortunate to collaborate with him on several of his players as I help them with their putting, which is super fun and just shows you the level of care that he has for his players, which is why he is such a large stable and is so busy. You can follow Tim on social, on Instagram and Twitter at Tim Cooke Golf, and that's Cooke with an E. So without further delay, let's get to this wide-ranging conversation in front of a live audience of golf professionals with my good friend, Mr. Tim Cooke. Enjoy. Thank you for the committee, and thank you for Ben for all your hard work. I'm extremely grateful to be here tonight in front of you guys in a state of gratitude. I've got that on my mind, which don't take that for granted, anybody. And it's an honor to have my good friend Tim Cooke here tonight. He's been on the show, but it's been 3 years ago, right? And we live in the same area now, but it's been way too long to kind of catch up. We do catch up a lot on the phone, but to catch up and share his knowledge and his expertise with you guys is a rare treat. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy what he has to say tonight. Tim is a Golf Magazine Top 100 instructor. Tim won the 2014 Section Teacher of the Year right after me in 2013.
Just following in your footsteps.
Yeah, there you go. So I laid the groundwork. Not really. And is a Golf Digest top teacher in South Carolina and just an all-around great guy. So I appreciate you being here.
No, it's I can't believe it's been 3 years since we did this.
I know. I listened to the last podcast. How many of you listened to the show out there? Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for your support. This has been a passion of mine for 4 years now. And every time I get ready to stop, somebody DMs me or sends me a nice text message saying that they've enjoyed the information and kind of just keeps me going, right? So it's nice to know that I'm affecting somebody in a positive way. And it's not me. I'm just basically sharing my really smart friends and the relationships that I've built over the years. And this wonderful business has been so good to me. So I'm excited to chop it up with you, Tim.
Oh, this will be great.
So for those of you that don't know Tim and haven't heard his backstory, share a little bit about how you got from England, where you grew up just outside of London, and you played golf at UVA. Take us back to those days, because I think it's a really interesting story of what he studied in college, which is super applicable to what you're doing now.
grew up in England. Family moved to the States during high school. So I was actually recruited to play college golf, just like an American kid, and played at Virginia. In my I redshirted my first year at Virginia. And so in my fourth year there, I can vividly still remember walking through grounds, trying to decide what in the world I was going to do with my life. And I realized that I wasn't good enough to play on the PGA Tour, even though that was my goal going to Virginia. And so I wanted golf to still be a part of my life. And I taught some golf camps for some extra money during the summer time in college. And I was like, maybe I'll go down that route. So I went to the education department, and actually a gentleman, Dr. Bob Winters, who was our assistant coach at the time, who's now a sports psych for Ledbetter.
Yeah.
Down at Championsgate. He was the assistant on the team, and he told me to go to the education department. I set up a meeting, and I told them what I wanted to do. I told them that I wanted to coach golf at the highest possible level. Is there anything I can do with my fifth year? And they said yes. So there's a master's degree called pedagogy, which is essentially the study of teaching. So there was a lot of sports psychology, motor learning, exercise physiology. And it was a wonderful deep dive academically for me for that year and a half where I was still technically playing on the team. Although once I started the master's program, it was probably less playing because it took a lot of my brain power to get through the coursework. But it was a great jumpstart for me because of the jumpstart from a science standpoint as to how the body moves, how we think, best ways to teach. I could jumpstart like my career in golf, and it definitely opened up some doors for me in the coaching world, which I don't think I would have got as quickly if I didn't have the academic background. And once I had the academic background, I still had to find somewhere to teach. You can have all the theory in the world, but if you don't have someone to teach, it's kind of tricky. But the academic background from UVA definitely opened that door for me. So this is late 90s, and cell phones really weren't a thing at that point. And the person who taught me as a kid, high school player in through college, he had an academy in Atlanta, and I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, well, you can come be an intern for us. So he's like, so I hopped in the car, drove to Atlanta, and John Tattersall, who was on your show last time.
Yeah.
So John was his director of instruction, and I had the address where John lived, and I just drove to Atlanta and knocked on the door. And he was actually flying back from England, so we kind of met there at the same time. And
a couple of English guys.
Yes, and he hasn't got rid of me since. So John is without question still a mentor of mine. Whenever I have a question from a golf swing standpoint, coaching standpoint, he is one of the people I go to. So that was very fortunate. So I was in Atlanta, and then from Atlanta, I had the opportunity to go to Cooke at Kiowa. So I worked there for a few years, got my Class A, which was super useful at that point because Kiowa would pay, the private club at that point would pay for your PGA education. Mm-hmm. So I was like, that's great. I'll stay here and they'll take care of it. So I did that. From Kiowa, I went to Wade Hampton up in North Carolina mountains, spent a couple years teaching there. Unbelievable course, incredible membership. Pete Matthews is the director of golf there. From there, I went to Long Cove on Hilton Head. I was there for 6 years as the head director of instruction.
Like that's when we met.
Mm-hmm, correct, yep. Yeah. And then making the story hopefully somewhat shorter, from there, I went to Sea Pines approached me to run the instructional programs for the resort. And 9 years later, I'm still at Sea Pines.
There you go. It's not a bad spot.
It's a good spot.
Yeah. So who were some of the mentors aside from John? I mean, you can talk about John a little bit. Who were some of your other influences that kind of helped you along the way? Actually,
the name that jumps out that's not, he's actually since passed, but William McKee founded Wade Hampton, and from a life and business sense, he was my go-to. And I met him because of teaching. He came to take a golf lesson. We created this relationship, and with that relationship, we became very close. And he was someone who I bounced ideas off from almost from a business development standpoint. Mm-hmm. And at one point, actually, when I was at Wade Hampton, I was in line for a couple director of golf jobs. I was in the interview process there, and he came to me and he said, "Tim," I'll clean up the language. Yeah. "Tim, what are you doing?" Right? And I'm like, "Well, it's a good opportunity." He said, "But that's not what you've always wanted to do." He's like, "You want to coach. That's what you've always told me. That's what you're good at." So pulled out of that and went stayed in teaching. Can I say that? Can I stayed in teaching?
I was going to say that had to be like some of the best advice you've ever got.
It worked out. Yeah, I think it worked out pretty well.
Yep. Different road, different path. Who knows if we would have heard of you.
Right. It's true.
Right? I mean, it's like
sure. Yeah. So, and again, coaching has brought me now. I'm so thankful for that opportunity and that conversation, because it opened other doors for me. It made me pursue and dive deeper into the coaching world, even though I was still teaching full time at that point and teaching a lot. It forced me and made me like really follow what I love to do and do deeper studies in the world of coaching.
Yeah. And so for those of you that don't know sort of Tim's clientele right now, and I know it wasn't always this way, but he teaches very high level players, right? So it's like you don't teach very many like average and sort of member golfers at this point, right?
Correct.
So we're gonna focus more on that tonight, and tomorrow we'll get into some more of the average golfers. But that's kind of his niche, right? I mean, maybe go into like how that happened. I mean, obviously you're a great coach, but you had to sort of want to steer your career in that direction in order to make it the way it is now.
For sure. So if you were going to pigeonhole me as a coach, I'm definitely more in the high performance and extremely results based. I want stats, I want data to help my players reach their goals. My objective is always, really no matter what your level is, I want to level you up. I do not want to work with a player who does not have a goal to jump a level. And that level can honestly be they're a 25 handicap player and they want to be a 15. That's still leveling up. They want to win their member guest. They want to win their member. That still counts. I enjoy helping people go from one level to the next. And I think because of that mindset, it's evolved into a high number of pros, college players, juniors trying to jump the ladder. And the only negative of that is that my clientele, it's hard to get a lesson now sometimes. Good problem to have. Hopefully that continues. But for the majority of this year, I've had a couple months where I've opened it up. I don't take on any more clients. I've like closed off to new clients for the majority of the year, unless you are high-end pro, high-end college. And so I keep some flexibility there because I need enough time to deliver the product I want to those players. I feel like if I don't have enough time and accessibility for that level of player, I will get fired.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of how it works in that world.
Yeah. And we're going to go into that. It looks glamorous a lot of the times, but it's very stressful.
It can be, yes.
At times as well, because there's a lot, I mean, as golf is, we fail more than we succeed.
Yeah.
Like we lose more than we win. But let's focus on juniors. Okay. Yeah. So the first thing, and I think you're an expert on this because it's cool. I think probably the most rewarding part is like taking a junior golfer and then watching them go through the different stages and making the tour, right? And you've done that with plenty of your players. But I want to focus specifically on the many junior golfers that you've gotten to that college level, especially like D1, D2, D3. Yep. A lot of D1 players. The recruiting process has changed a lot, as you guys all know. And you did a fantastic presentation. We did a workshop together a few months ago at Berkeley and hit on some really interesting points that I didn't even think about, even though I'm teaching some elite juniors as well. So can you elaborate on your process of when you see a player and sort of the information you give them? Because I know sometimes it's the hard truth of like, maybe you don't have what it takes, or this is what you need to do to get to the next level.
So I look at junior development as for making the level up jump to college golf. So if parents and junior are coming to me for a consultation, I want to know what the objective is. And so odds are high they're trying to make a jump up to college golf. And so I look at the data as to where they stand. I think it's really important to be very honest with juniors and the parents, because they're the ones paying the bill, to where do you stand from a score standpoint? What are your scores? It's results based. And I take that information so I know where the starting point is. So if your scoring differential is under par, in the negative, it's become harder. Essentially, with the transfer portal, it has become harder to play D1 golf. And your scoring differential needs to be a -1 or better. So a scoring differential is the course rating. So say it's rated as 74. If you shoot a 74, your scoring differential is 0. And that all gets plugged into a junior golf scoreboard formula. So it's very easy to see where a kid stacks up against their peers based on how they're shooting on that number. So if a young man or young woman's scoring differential is +9, that's fine. They can still play college golf, but it's probably not going to be one at the D1 level unless they do the work. So in the first meeting, I let them know where they stand, what it may or may not take to get to the level they want to achieve. I think it's important as a coach, if you're dealing with juniors who want to play in college golf, you want to know where they stand and what it takes to get to that level. And there's phenomenal options at Division II. There's phenomenal options at Division III, like NAIA. There's so many options out there. And then once you get to college, it becomes performance-based again. Like with the transfer portal, the positive of the transfer portal is that you can be at one school, play very well for 2 years. You can enter the transfer portal and you can now level up. So there's positives and negatives. Yeah, like your son, right?
Yeah.
For sure. So that's part one. So I have the data piece, which is also included in the development. I use statistics as to how they're playing. Then there's the technical swing, putting, short game elements that I look for in terms of development and assessing where that junior is. And then there's the emotional piece too, arguably the most important. I left it till last. From an emotional standpoint, how is that junior going to handle the pressure of college recruiting? Because it is really, really difficult. I have so much respect for junior golfers who are willing to go out, play competitive golf, have their name on the leaderboard. But now in social media world, it's also going to be on the internet in a heartbeat. And all of their peers at home are going to be able to see what they shot, whether they shot 72 or 92, it's there. And I think that's very important as a coach to recognize that fact that the junior in front of you who's competing there's a social pressure that is applied to them. And I think you as the coach have to be aware of that and check in with them to help them navigate that piece of the equation and give them some skills to navigate their improvement. And it's not just saying, hey, good job, and patting them on the back. It's when they play poorly, how can you give them a skill to reflect and then on what was not as good as we want, and then where can we improve? I think there's the emotional piece in the junior golf world because it's so competitive and scores are all over the place and everyone can see it. I think you have to definitely attend to the emotional piece and have a skill to give them. Don't just say, hey, it will be okay. Don't be anxious. That doesn't work. Got to give them something to do.
I mean, it's all over the news now. With once they get to college, talking about anxiety and mental health as being at the forefront. Do you have like another part of the team, maybe a sports psychologist or somebody that you send your players to? And I think the last piece is like dealing with the parents, right? Because I think the parents can put that pressure on the kid to perform, or do you educate the parents at all as far as how they deal with the bad rounds?
I try. Yes.
That's the hard part.
I want the parent to be as involved as possible in my lessons. If a parent wants to stand right next to me on the lesson tee, I welcome them and put my arm around them. I want them there. I know the parent will see more shots of that junior than I will ever see. So I want them to be part of the team. I want them to be a resource for me, to give me information. But also if the parent does not want to be there, the parent does not want to be on the range or does not want to be on the course, that's okay too. We just have to find where they're going to fit in the growth of the child from a performance standpoint.
Yeah, it's such a difficult
and
part
then
of it.
Matt Cooke works with me he's my sports site guy at Sea-Pine, so he will work with a number of players. And then with my background personally, I'm like studying that world as much as possible, even if it's giving, and I really believe in like mindfulness techniques to help lower the chemicals that are raging in the emotional cortex, right? And we're trying to like calm that down. So I will definitely use mindfulness techniques with a lot of juniors and teach them breathing techniques to work through that.
Yeah. Share that with the audience. I think that was really, really interesting and something you can take to your students right away.
Yeah. So I think there's 2 box breathing techniques that are very popular. One is the 4s, which if you tell a junior, the Navy SEALs use the 4s, they're going to do it, right? It's it's a 4 count. So imagine a box, hence box breathing. You go up for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, and you work the box. And again, when you picture the box, it creates a very much a here and now presence sense, but without question. And again, there's some nice data and science behind it that it lowers the area of your brain that causes fight or flight. So we're lowering that emotional response, which is important when you're playing golf. Like after you, how can we bring it down? The other one that's interesting, 4-5-7s. So there's a vagus nerve runs kind of through your body. There's some really cool research on this one that it can massively lower the emotional piece of things without
cortisol, I think.
Yeah, there we go. I'm trying to make it as brief as possible.
Yeah.
But so 4-5-7 is like, so I'd go in for 4, hold for 5, exhale for 7, and then follow that pattern. And honestly, if you do a 4-5-7, you can very, very quickly calm things down. So a lot of my players and juniors, like, I work that into a session, sometimes very bluntly and sometimes more subtly.
Yeah, that's great advice. I use the Waking Up app. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that. And I recommend that to all my players, which is really good. Just a meditation app, but it has a lot of information based around what you just said, the breathing and the basically transcendental meditation.
Yeah.
If you can get kids to do that, or college players or professional players, I think it's super helpful.
I'll do everything I can possibly do to make the performance better and make that junior in front of me who's coming to me to like level up. I'll do whatever it takes to make them jump a level. Yeah, completely, whatever it takes.
All right, so let's talk about your process, right? And this could be helpful for everybody. When a player comes to you, what kind of process do you have? What do you go through? What kind of, I guess, structure do you have in a lesson, right? And then building out a practice plan. But let's go with your sort of sweet spot as far as like if a college player, or let's say a mini tour guy or a PGA Tour guy comes to you for the first time, take us through what you look at and then what you do.
So that level of player, if they're like college, mini tour, Korn Ferry Pro, PGA and above, the nice thing for them, there's already some data on them. So you can kind of see their scores. So I'll do some homework before they arrive as much as possible to find out where they actually stand. I'll try to spend some time on the phone with them before they arrive. If possible, that doesn't always work out, but if possible, I will, almost to establish the relationship. I think the relationship is like so critical at that level of play because they have to trust me. I want them to trust me. If they don't trust me, the relationship is ended. Like they're going to come once and be done. So I'm trying to establish that as early as possible. When they arrive on site, let's say, for the example's sake here, they're coming to me because their driving is no good. Like their issue is the driver. They've told me on the phone they're missing too many fairways. It's bomb down the middle, then it's block right, low left for a store. So we're going to go full swing. I'm not going to look at their short game if they're telling me that, and the stats bear that out. You kind of go for the obvious, what they're telling you and what the stats show you. And you're hoping that matches up, by the way. It doesn't always match up. Doesn't always match up. Most of the time it does, though.
Yeah.
And so with that, and I say we're doing a driver focus, then I'll have them on the tee, let them go through their normal warm-up. If that involves like movement prep, great. If it doesn't, maybe we'll add that later. We'll talk about physical history, past swing thoughts, who they've worked with in the past, what's worked, what doesn't work, what shot do they hate? Hate's a really strong word, but just go with it. Yeah. I go, what shot do you hate? Because they've got you want to know what's the worst thing possible for them. Then what shot do they like to see? When they've played their best, what shot are they hitting? And what's interesting from a data collection, so then while they're telling me these stories, they're often hitting shots. So I'm running TrackMan or FlightScope, whichever one I have out at the time, maybe getting some swing catalyst data at the same time if possible. So they're telling me the story while I'm collecting data. I don't want to waste the time and have them tell the story, then say, ooh, let's get data now.
Yeah.
That's
doing
like,
it all at the same
I'm
time.
trying to make it flow at the same time. And so with the information I've got ahead of time, the information from Swing Catalyst or TrackMan, FlightScope, their story on site, what I'm seeing, then if it's full swing, my first thing is, does the picture in their head of the shot they want to hit, does it match their numbers? Meaning, if somebody really, really they see a fade, they've played their best hitting a fade, their picture is still a fade, and everything they're doing from a movement standpoint on Swing Cat to a path number on TrackMan is draw, that's the problem.
Right.
And so I want what they do from a functional movement, body, club movement standpoint to match their picture of the picture they want. Occasionally, they're so far away from, say, a fade, and it's so draw-based, then it's going to be a slow progression to get. It may take 8 months to get them to a fade.
Has there ever been a chance or a time where you had somebody that says, I want to hit a fade, they test out draw and probably should have been in draw, but they want to be a fade, and you've had to have that decision to make for that player?
Yes.
I've seen it so many times. A guy comes to you and says, and maybe they've leveled up, right?
Yep.
I had one guy come to me, he's like, just got on PGA Tour. I now want to switch my ball flight. And you're like, why? Yeah,
that would be why is the first question there. Please don't. So yes, and so if someone, and then I'm very honest with them, they want to hit a fade and everything's draw. Say the path is 3 degrees in to out. They're very lead toe heel based pressure pattern in there from their Swing Cat numbers. Like that maybe they really twist the handle a lot. Like they really twist the handle a lot in early transition. That person, if I'll actually tell them, it's like, well, you may want to hit a fade, but why don't we hit draw for a while and then try to get it to neutral, and then we're open to seeing what we need to do.
Gotcha.
Because I'll tell them, I'll list the elements that are draw, and I say, well, and you've got a tournament next week. You're going to hit draws. Why don't we try seeing draws? And then you go on the course and see if it's possible. So it's all good in the lab, shall we say, as to where the numbers are, how the shot shape is moving on the driving range, hitting out of a hitting bay, off a mat. And then you go on the course and you go, can you see the draw? And they're like, nope. So then you have to, it's further discussion. Or you flip it on them and you say, well, let's talk about how you hit a fade. And then you give them a very draw pattern, but just shift that baseline. So for a right-handed golfer, you can shift the baseline far enough left from a setup perspective and have them hit a push cut. It's okay, right? And then you're matching the picture.
Right.
I would say for most players, whatever their picture is, you must match it. Unless it's so off, like where their numbers are, then you have to just tell them, like, I think you need to be draw and go with it.
Do you do any functional screens?
I skipped that. Sorry. I do on the first meet, I'm picking some functional screens from TPI World almost as I go. So as they're hitting, you can start to see how they're walking, maybe how they're favoring, maybe their hips are out of a line. So then I'll like do a hip test, or you're asking questions about injuries. And they're like, yeah, I kind of tugged my left shoulder in college, but it doesn't bother me now is always the excuse. But it doesn't bother me. So then you do a 1990 test to try and see some range of motion in the shoulder joint, and it's not good. And that will like help you dictate what swing direction. So I do functional movement screens. Yes, is the quick answer. The slightly longer answer is I do them based on what they're doing.
As you're watching them.
As I'm watching them.
Yeah.
And then I have a few people locally, but one gentleman in particular, Coach Chris Noss, he has one of the more detailed functional screens I've ever seen. So I'll send some of my players to him and then get that report as needed.
Yeah, I know you use Tattersaw a little bit for 3D stuff.
For sure.
So you've got radar, obviously video, swing cat. So you've kind of covered all the bases. 3D is tough to do a lot of times from a time constraint.
Especially in a first session, unless they're like person's willing to spend like 5 hours with me, which is sometimes that happens. Yeah. The first session is I can rip through it in 2 hours if I've talked to them on the phone for half an hour ahead of time.
So you got a little more information up front. Yeah, for sure.
But it's normally 3.
Yeah, and I know you're big about building plans, right? So it's like the last piece, it's something I've learned from you is like once you've worked with them, you've done the analysis, you start making changes. How do you communicate that plan, and then how do you like follow up and keep up with your players? I think that's interesting.
So for every lesson I have, whether it be someone who's a competitive recreational golfer or a tour pro, I use the Coach Now app, and I put their plan in Coach Now. And so I just literally type it in. And so it's there. And the thread will say game plan thread. It's like very in your face. And I'll list the points that they have to work through. And then once honestly, with most players, I feel like by the second or third session from a full swing standpoint, we both know what the game plan is. Being a little more concrete, and there's some elements that are more important. I had a guy from Europe here on Friday, and there's one piece, it sounds so easy, but like there's one piece of his plan that he must do, and it's in his takeaway, his lead arm, his lead arm must in at end of takeaway or P2, right? Where you go P's, like so that. Club shaft parallel to the ground. His left arm must appear like it's going straight back at the camera, and his club head must be outside the hands. That is not for everybody. For some golfers, that doesn't matter. Like I have some players who are really good, whose club head can be like just inside the hands at that point. But for him, he performs at an incredibly high level of ball striking if he hits that point. And so every player will have generally one or two of key checkpoints, movement-wise, whether it be club to body or setup pressure or how the body's loading in the swing that they must do.
So before we get into some of your players, we're going to talk about a couple of good stories and some failures, obviously. How would you describe your style? How do you train your players? Like, what do you, I mean, everybody's different. I understand that, but how would you sort of categorize the way you get your information to your players and then how you train them?
I am a big believer in teaching patterns. So I always do it first with the player because sometimes they think they're going to look really ridiculous on the driving range, but I'll have them move, throw balls, throw medicine balls, do lateral jumps, like work up against mirrors, walls, just to learn whatever the pattern, the movement pattern change it may be from us. Like say I'm trying to change their vertical force, or when it happens, I'll like take the club out of their hand and do a pivot exercise that like enhances it so they can learn the movement that is needed. Very task-based training. Yep. Okay. So I'd say learning patterns, homework on those patterns, like they have to do things at home. I think you can get really, really good at golf not hitting golf balls. Like I really do. I think you can, if you give, there's a lady I coach at Sea Pines, and she's such a fun lesson. I see her about once a month. And over the last 2 years, I bet she's gone from, maybe 3 years actually, she's gone from a high 30s and now she's like about a 15 handicap. It's awesome. And she just plays golf, but she does a whole bunch of stuff at home. She like practices at home, like does some movement stuff at home, and she's way better for it.
Yeah.
So she just plays, does some movement work at home. She's better. Super fun. So, but that works for every player, like all the way to the tour pro. So I'll do homework assignments literally at home. It's very healthy. It doesn't have to be on the driving range. On the range, I really believe in slow practice, like dropping the speed so they can have some spatial awareness as to where the club body is in space.
Love it.
It's a hard sell sometimes, but like can be a pain in the tush. And
especially
say,
for the type A personalities that want to go fast. It's tough to get them to.
It's very difficult. So like just dropping the speed and just drop into whatever they think that is. And it can, I always say 40%. I don't know why I say 40%, but that's really slow. And they'll probably only drop about 5-10 miles an hour off the speed. Yeah. But that's enough. The golf swing is so short. If I can add more time to the equation, and then I'm very directing in a lesson in terms of what are you feeling? What are you aware of? So that they do a drill. Say I'm doing a drill. I'm trying to like change their right arm position at the top because they've got some extra run of the arms. So the chest and like rib cage stops and the arms go more higher than I want at the top. Maybe I'll put an aim rod underneath their right arm to try and trap it to like give them a feel. So I tell the golfer, I don't want you to be good at having an aim rod under your right armpit. What are you feeling? What are you aware of? And then I'll keep asking questions until they come up with something that they can tell me that they are doing internally. That's a really internal question.
And use their language.
And use their language. Yeah. And it's amazing if you keep asking, so what are you feeling? I don't know yet. All right, do it again. What are you aware of? No, with your right arm. What are you aware of? And you may have to direct somewhat, but it's amazing what people come up with. You've got an aim rod under their right arm and they tell you that they feel it in their left knee. Great. All right, let's take the aim rod away. Do you feel that in your left knee now? Yes, sweet. You hit the ball better. So that's kind of how like I fire questions as to awareness.
Yeah. Deep practice.
Deep practice and have them pay attention.
Love it. All right, let's talk about a few of your players.
Okay.
All right, so tell us about Carson Young.
So Carson is a really fun story. Like wonderful young man. He played at Clemson and had some status on PGA Tour Canada. Then COVID hit. So that whole thing got messed up in terms of those developmental tours. And so he approached me at that time to like start to do some work. And it was awesome. So he started playing quite well, made it through. Actually, he played pretty well. They had was it Local IQ that year or was that Form Tour? They renamed Canada for 1 year. It was Form. Yeah. So they renamed Canada when they couldn't go to Canada with COVID to Form Tour. And he did okay. So it got him to second stage of Q School. Mm-hmm. So we had some early success. That always helps when you have early success. They start to trust. And then he got to second stage, played well at second stage, actually shot 64 final round. He was outside the number, got way inside the number, then went to final stage of Corn Ferry Q School, got his full card. It's awesome. Super happy for him. So finally has full status out there. And then he wins his third event on the Corn Ferry Tour. It's awesome, right? So now he's super. Then the whole year he's like, we're watching the number, right? Is he going to keep his card? Is he keeping his card? And at the end of the year, he just doesn't finish top 25. So then he goes to Corn Ferry finals or playoffs. Yeah. Plays very well, gets his tour card. So what's really great about Carson is that, and it's what the beauty of the PGA Tour, he went from mini tour to the PGA Tour in 18 months. That is an incredible amount of work on his part. I appreciate how much trust he put in me to change his swing, to change his movement pattern, to help him like hit his goals. It's a great story. And he actually, when he came to me, he actually told me if he didn't get through Q School that year, he was going to stop playing professional golf.
Oh, wow.
So he went from possibly not playing all the way to the PGA Tour. So couldn't be happier for him.
Crazy. So before we get to the next one, we talked earlier about how many players you had in first stage this year.
Yeah. So
and then how many made it? Like share that.
Yeah. So that's the fun story. Carson's the fun story. 18 months to the PGA Tour. It's from nothing to the PGA Tour is phenomenal. The flip side of that. So this year in developmental world, I had a few guys get through pre-qualifying to get to first stage. So in first stage this year, I had 15 guys who were at first stage. 8 of them made it through, which is like great, yet it still hurts. Like it's a fun text to say, hey, you made it to second stage. It's a tough phone call when they didn't, because now their season has ended. It's part of it. So that it's not quite 50, just over 50%. Yeah. So then of those 8, only 2 made it to final stage. So now I'm at 2 of 15. So that's not that good, right? And it does. It's care deeply about every single one of those 15. And it's as fun as it is when a guy makes it to the next level, or in the women's game, the girl makes it to the next level. It's really tough. I had a young lady on Epsom Tour this year who didn't play Epsom Tour. That's like the Symetra.
Yeah,
it used to be Symetra, so LPGA Corn Ferry. It's so tough. I have so much respect for those women because there's no money on the Epsom Tour, and they work so hard. So she actually didn't play a full schedule just because it costs so much money to play it. And if you finish top 35 on the money list on Epsom, you make it to final stage of Q School. Mm-hmm. She finished 36th.
Oh,
right?
Brutal,
right? So another failure. But I feel for those players. I care so much that the successes are fun and you have to enjoy those moments because they're not as frequent as the fails.
Yeah.
So on Corn Ferry this coming season, I'll have 3 players. It's another cool story. So when he's got a cool golf swing. He's the guy. So I've worked with him. This is my 3rd year now working with him. I will not take any credit for his college success because it was before me, but he was a D2 national champion. And then I started working with him after that year. And so he sets up the lesson and I'm working with a junior on the range and he's going to be my last session of the day, like summertime, 3:00. And he's getting ready to go back to Q School. So 3 years ago. And I'm working with the junior and I see John walk up and I'd seen his stats. I knew how good of a player he was. And this ball just starts rocketing off the face and the slot next to us. And I'm keep glancing over. I'm trying to be really present with the young man, the junior I'm with. But like my eyes are like drifting over to John because this ball is coming out like a rocket. And it's like this coolest golf swing in terms of how he moves. Club face was like wide open up top, yet he was like hammering it up there. So this past year, he played very well. He almost got his tour card, finished 45th-ish on the regular season. Mm-hmm. Phenomenal ball striker, like just another wonderful person. Great ball striker. Like he's a rock star. He really is good. But John, it's an interesting development. So if you looked at his swing then to what it is now, it's like we've slowly evolved it to create a more repetitive pattern. And back to patterning, was he's an interesting picture. This has happened to me a couple of times. Doesn't happen often, but John, he hits fades with his woods, draws with everything else. So maybe that's the answer to your question. Split the difference.
You got to figure out what works for them, right?
Yep, and he's phenomenal at that.
Yeah.
Really good.
Super cool. All right, well, let's talk about the girls. You got Lauren Stevenson on the LPGA Tour. I know you've got a couple others.
Yep. So Lauren's on the LPGA Tour, and then a couple girls on Symetra. Keep saying Symetra. Epsom. Got to get the right sponsor. Yeah. And Lauren's done great. Like she keeps slowly but surely getting better. Dying to help out with some putting now too. I will say this: when it comes to like this, as you're like trying to level up the players, I send emails and texts and videos to my friends of players I have all the time. And sometimes I'll tell the player, hey, I'm going to ask a friend of mine about this because I'm not sure. I did it with one of my male pros with you recently on putting too. And just because I know that I do not know it all. I know there's people out there who have done deeper studies in the different areas of the game. So if I can pull some information from them, happy.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I admire the most about you is like, you admit you don't know all the answers. Like a lot of times we get very protective of like, okay, I'm not going to like consult with somebody else. I mean, I value your trust to like have me help you a little bit. I mean, that's why you're great. I mean, I think it really is. It's going, hey, I don't know the answers, or maybe somebody else can help my player, and you enlist a team.
Correct. And I bet when 15 years ago, I probably wouldn't be as willing to do that.
Maybe,
but it goes both ways, right? So I will consult with a lot of players on their swings.
And you've helped me with my son, and I've sent you swings of my players as well. So we kind of go back and forth a little bit. Yeah. Super cool. All right, so let's dig it. We'll get a little geeked up a little bit here, right?
Okay.
So we got Swing Catalyst as one of our sponsors. Thank you so much for that. And you use Swing Cat. So the craze nowadays is what? Like, how do we get our players to go faster, right? How do we use the ground? So take us through some of your framework as far as like, I know you're a big pivot guy, right? So, and especially when you're working with higher caliber players, it's a lot more about the body than it is about probably using your hands and arms most of the time, I would say. That fair to?
I think that's fair because if you're playing at a high level, to some degree, unknowingly, you've probably already figured out how to get the club face twisting around like the long axis of the shaft. Like at some point in the golf swing, like that club face has got to turn around it. Otherwise, you're not hitting it straight. So at a high level, they figured that out to some degree. For the most part.
Yeah, exactly.
So then I'm using body functioning. I use Swing Cat in 90% of my full swing lessons. With every first assessment, I use it because it gives me data that I can't see. It gives me information that I can't see. I'm super fortunate to have it. I appreciate that. But you do get to a point where like you use it so much, I'm almost like guessing when I have them on the range. Okay, I think it's going to do this. This is
based on like what you're seeing.
What I'm seeing,
video,
correct.
Yeah.
In the flesh, what it's going to do. So I think let's just do setup. Can we just do setup?
Absolutely. I want to go from setup to like through the swing.
Okay.
Because we've talked about this before at length, but I think it's going to be super helpful for the listener is going from setup. What are your preferences and what are you kind of seeing with your better players? Okay. And then kind of go through the piece.
Got it. So everything's a preference. This is my preference. I'm going to admit my preferences is what I like to see in a player. Setup first, I like the balance point in each foot to be located just behind the balls of the feet. I think I've yet to have a good player set up on the heels, like so the pressure is too much on the heels. If you make a mistake, I'd prefer them on the toes because then at least they can turn to their heels in the backswing. Right? Like if you're going to make a mistake, you have to choose one end, choose the toes. I would prefer the entire foot to be on the ground. And that sounds like a ridiculous statement. The number of times you can look at someone, especially if the range is kind of cut short or if you're on a mat, look at the shoes. Like I look at the shoes all the time. At setup, if you can see a little air under the heel, they're probably too much on their toes. Or if their toes are like clearly like curled up, they're probably too much on the heels. And then you can look at some points from a down the line perspective. I will look at, is their hip joint, so right in the middle of the hip, is that located over your heel? So if the hip is over the heel with a good hip hinge, that balance point in their feet is probably just behind the like front of the arch, right near the balls of the feet. So I have zero, that's why you asked the questions, Jason. I have zero good players who set up with 51 or more % on their trail foot. If a good player shows up or arrives and they're hitting it poorly and they get on the Swing Cat and they're hitting some shots and right before they pull the trigger, it's 51 or more % on their trail foot from a pressure standpoint, added like right in that moment before they hit go. If it's 51 or more, they will hit it badly. I don't even have to tell them. I say, hey, you're too much on your back foot. Can you be a little more balanced? And if I just tell them to be really technical stuff, isn't it? Be balanced. Can you be more balanced? They will instinctively shift like a few percentage points to that lead foot and they'll start hitting it better. Like I have zero. I have zero who start with like 51 or more on their trail. If you start with a little extra pressure on your lead foot, it's really easy to push off that point to get the ground force reacting back at you so you can get the club moving. If it's too much on your trail foot to begin with, you're probably not going to push into the ground on your lead side enough, and then therefore the ground pushes back at you, so you're not getting any energy into the system. The golfer is being the system. So then you're going to see the swing that starts kind of all armsy, kind of picky-uppy, like another technical term, picky-uppy. So
you're teaching tour players?
Yeah. That's what I use. It's like it works really well. So you can push off like the lead foot.
James Lights calls it, he says the ground reaction forces start before the club starts back.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about Swing Cat is that like you're seeing things happen before they happen, moves, right? Like you see almost how the person is like pushing into you start to see how they're pushing and using the ground to start the swing. I do think the takeaway is very important in terms of like using a push off your lead foot to help load and move pressure to your trail foot. That will help get the club lined up, kind of how I would like for that golfer. Then it changes.
P3, where do you like to see a P3?
So left arm parallel, I prefer, so I'm going to see pressure in the foot, kind of midfoot of the trail foot at this point. I'm probably going to see, not always, but I hope to see some unweighting of the lead heel, the left heel for right-hand golfer at that point. So it's kind of very middle trail foot, starting the unweighting process of the lead heel. And then club hands, as we're doing straight preferences here, I'm going to see the hands from down the line perspective, somewhat opposite the right side of the chest. Club somewhat. Then it gets really tricky for a podcast conversation because then it's like now we're matching things up. Like depending on how the person is attaching their hands to the club and their grip, I think that will dictate the club face angle and how they're going to curl or hinge wrists on the backswing. So again, if we're talking good players, they've probably got a pattern there. So I'm not like, I may not mess.
We're just talking just the ground, just body pivots.
Okay, perfect. Yep.
Yeah. So what do you like to see as far as like the centers at the top, upper body, lower body, pelvis?
Can I just do right hand, left hand for the sake of it? No offense to any left-handed players here. So I want the front side, your left side to turn into the right, like on the way back. I may tell the golfer, can you turn your belt buckle into your right pocket? Like I'm trying to use an image to like get them moving. I want like the center mass of the upper body. I like it if it moves a little bit. I love if the head can move about 2 centimeters away from the target on the backswing. I'm really good if like there's some like head tilts going. So then there's some rotation around cervical spine, like base of the neck stuff, because that can help carry the club to the top. And then I really think it's important that the center of the pelvis, so if you take your pelvis and like you could put a point right in the middle of the pelvis, I like that to be slightly outside of, or at least in line with, the upper body center at the top of the golf swing. The mass, meaning like the physical me, has quote unquote loaded into the trail side as much as possible.
With a sort of a late centering, would you?
Yes, correct. So then there's probably most importantly, if there's good functional movement in the trail hip, in the right hip, can they internally rotate into that hip joint and take left side over there?
Gotcha.
Which means the right leg will like maintain some flex in the knee, but it will probably straighten slightly.
Some extension.
They'll extend and therefore my rib cage will start rotating around my spine and my thoracic. So like mid stuff will start extending a little bit.
So the most important thing is like early transition, sequencing, right? Which goes right along with what Swing Cat measures.
Correct.
Describe what you like to see there.
This is 100%. I've yet to see someone not do this. Peak forces on the downswing. So there's a horizontal force, which think of horizontal as like, some people call it shear force. So it's very much linear. So I'm going to push that way to go that way. You have to have some vertical to have horizontal. If not, you're like kind of floating. It's not straight across. There's going to be a horizontal force. You want that somewhere in transition, depending on the player. So we'll say top of backswing.
Right.
So I want that peaking top of backswing, the push from my trail getting me to the front. I want that top of backswing. Halfway down, I want to see peak rotational. Think of rotational forces, kind of goes across, like think of it from a toe to heel perspective. So this is a podcast and an audience at the same time. So I'm demoing yet the podcast, people can't see me.
It's okay. They're way more important.
There you go. So like think of, this is my back foot, here's my front foot. So my back foot's going to go away from the golf ball. My front foot's going to go towards it.
Like if somebody hit balls off ice.
Off ice, your back foot slips out, right? It goes backwards. And the front foot. So I want the peak of that ground reaction force to happening at about halfway down. And there's some body stuff tying into that. I think it's really important that your left side is lined up at that juncture. If possible, you can get your left foot, knee, hip, shoulder, all in a line at lead arm parallel. And I find when I can achieve that with a player, the next step would be like peak vertical.
Yeah.
So vertical, think jump. The majority of the vertical comes from their front leg. And so peak vertical with irons, especially driving maybe a smidge earlier, but irons is going to be around club shaft parallel to the ground.
Hands about over
hands. Like so hands. As long as the hands are below the hip, I'm okay.
There you go.
Right. How about that? As long as the hands are below the hip. Because that's peak vertical. So think of vertical. So my left leg is pushing, my lead leg is pushing really hard. At that point, I'm going to be like yank. I'm going to be pulling really hard with my lead shoulder, my left shoulder up and back. And I'm going to be like ripping hard on the grip. So I'm pulling up here and I'm pushing down there. Yeah. And that's important because that will like throw the sweet spot with a high-end player, any player, but especially a high-end player. It'll pitch the sweet spot out into the golf ball. Because you will often see that really, really fast player, club looks very underplane. They look like they're going to be stuck, but they won't be stuck if they time the vertical and push like crazy.
I talked about that with Tattersall last week, and that's sort of how you keep the face from closing too fast. I always think, rotation for sure, but it's also the sagittal plane and the pushing up.
Yeah.
It really slows the face down. If you got a hooker, or you get somebody that hits pulls.
Pulling on the handle, left shoulder's going up and back.
Off. Yeah.
It seems...
That's gold right there, by the way.
Yeah.
I hope you're writing this stuff down.
But I do think it changes the face. But like, again, if I'm dealing with a high-end player, I think the face is okay most of the time. Yeah. If the face is bad with a high-end player at impact, they are doing something else. It's probably not their handle twist. It's probably something way earlier that's causing the impact alignment to be off. Okay. But I think it does get the sweet spot to pitch outwardly. And I think that's really important.
Love it.
So I'll demo that tomorrow morning.
All right. So before we take some questions, hopefully everybody's got some questions lined up here. Share with the audience your favorite drill for the pivot and all of that stuff that's kind of wrapped up into what you just described, because I know you've got a couple of really good ones.
I have too many drills, Jason.
Yeah.
Not to have a favorite.
Somebody that's not, well, the proper step drill.
Yeah. I do use that one a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
So step drills, I have a lead foot step drill. It's been around for years and years and years. I have an issue with how a lot of people do the step drill because it doesn't line up the front side fully. So I may have to stand up in a second for that. I'll stand up in a bit and show you this. Sure. So typical, how I'll teach the step drill, I'll do it in a sequence of 3. First, I'll do trail foot or right foot step back. So feet are somewhat close together, say hip width apart, and then I'll have them step the right foot away and then swing the club. So it's step, swing, step, swing. That really helps throw quickly pressure to my trail side, my backside, and then I can get the club moving from there. So it helps teach the shift to the trail side. So I'll go feet close together, right foot step back, trail foot step back, step, swing. So that'll be part 1. Do practice swings first, then hit balls, and then away you go. So then I'll do double step. So feet really close together, trail foot step back, swing. The cue, is as my hands pass my head, step your lead side forward. That means not just the foot. It's the whole darn thing. Like I want like shoulder, hip. I want the whole darn thing going forward. And then if needed, I'll do single foot, left foot step, which would be like feet relatively close together. As my hands pass my head going back, then I'll step my lead side forward because I'm trying to line up that joint. I see my issue with the step drill, the lead foot forward step to try and help the sequence and the kinematic sequence in the downswing is that people they'll swing it back and then they'll just step the foot. If they just step the foot and the lead shoulder, the front shoulder goes up too soon, you just made them worse, in my opinion, because the foot's gone forward, the shoulder's gone up, and now they can't control the low point of the golf swing. In my opinion, it has to be the whole lead side going forward so they can have low point control. If they step just the foot, you're going to top them or chunk them. Neither, and they're not happy with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, there is one more in the step drill world. Because sometimes if I'm really feeling it with the player on the lead foot and they struggle with just the single foot on the left foot side, I'll give them the normal stance, lift their left toes off the ground. So like it looks really normal, but their left toes are off the ground. And then as their hands pass their head on the backswing, I tell them to push their left toes into the ground. That creates an incredible fast shift forward and club head speed ramps up. So sometimes I'll do that one with a medicine ball toss to like get going with. Actually, I'll do all of those with a med ball toss if needed. But if you do the med ball toss with toes up, like take 2 steps back because that ball is coming at you really fast. And they don't mean to. It creates incredible speed.
That's
so
awesome.
If you do left toes up and you're doing a med ball toss, I should make you sign a waiver that you'll take 2 steps back before that ball's because it's coming at you quick.
Love it. Really good. All right. I lied. I got one more question. Okay. It's a 2-part before we open it up to some questions from the audience. One, how do you think we're doing as an industry to educate young coaches out there or just coaches in general? The backside of that follow-up is, what advice would you give young coaches or coaches that want to get better and improve their skills?
In this room, that doesn't apply, does it? Because everyone's here and open to learn. So good job, everyone. Congratulations. I think as an industry, what's nice is that there is so much more sharing of information than we've ever had. I have people, and I'm really honored when someone comes and shadows me. I used to do that a lot myself. And I really appreciate the time. Every time someone comes to shadow, I wish I had more time for them, and I don't. My schedule gets a little hectic. So in terms of meetings and players, when they leave, I'm like, God, I wish I had spent some more time with them. just to talk, almost doing what we're doing right now.
Like a recap, right?
A recap.
Stuff,
yeah. So I appreciate that. I think the nice thing about social media, even though there may be some negatives in terms of like score posting for the emotional standpoint for our junior players, the nice thing about social media is that there's so much information on there. And sometimes it's just snippets, but like you can go down some wonderful rabbit holes of information. I think as an industry, we're so much more open to sharing than we've ever been. Yeah. And I know I'm a better coach because of it, like without question. Yeah. So I think that's good. And then for young coaches, there's a ton of info out there. You have to investigate, test it on yourself. I actually have a rule with new technology that no one, myself, and I applied the rule I started with myself and now I apply it to my entire staff. When there's new technology, you're not allowed to use it on a paying customer for 1 month because you better know what that technology tells you. Now, you can have some guinea pigs, like some non-paying customers use the technology so you learn what that is. And I would say the same thing for a young coach. Like, you may have to like teach your friends for free. Do something to figure out the communication piece because you could have all the greatest information in the world. You have to have ways to communicate that to the player. So right now I'm in the middle of staff training for Sea Pines, where our assistant pros run all of our daily clinics. So I want them to have as much knowledge as they can, not to like spout out all that knowledge in a clinic setting, but they're more prepared. So if I can give them more information and more experiences in our winter education series, I think my hope is that they can like whittle that down so they can give one easy piece of advice.
Hopefully we can collab on that like we did last year.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
For sure.
Very good. All right. Questions. Hopefully you guys got some questions. Sean.
Tim, thanks for not going to the Top 100 Summit. Very appreciative of your time. So you're talking about pitcher matching. I feel like I'm a shot first kind of teacher. How do you maybe help somebody create a better picture? So if you kind of, hey man, your stuff you're doing, I know you want to hit a fade, but
it needs to be a draw.
Well, or it might be something straighter than what you're seeing. I know I work with a lot of like just new golfers, and that's a big step for me. It's just kind of teaching them how to see a golf shot.
Got it. Yeah. So how do I teach the picture when it's really needed? That makes sense. So I'll actually frequently add the picture back into a lesson if I've done backswing work. So say I've used a swing thought we've done today. They're turning the belt buckle into their right pocket, and that's like their main technical vibe that they're driving with in their head. But the shot pattern's not good enough on the range, and say I'm running the numbers and it should be okay. Like the path's okay, the face is just kind of inconsistent. Maybe the low point's not quite there, but like the movement pattern is really what I'm looking for. I'll use ropes and aim rods. And it may be a rope straight down right next to them, a 10-foot rope going out, like kind of right off the ball line or target line. Say they're more fade-based picture, then I'll put the golf ball is just to the side of the rope, and then the 10-foot rope goes straight at their target. And I say, hit a little fade around the corner of the rope. And then if they're draw, they need to be draw, I'll put the golf ball directly on the rope line, but maybe 1 foot back. And I'll tell them I want them to start it to the right of the rope and draw it around the rope. I'll use a 10-foot rope a lot to help them. And then I'll often use double gates or 2 aim rods downrange or 1 aim rod. And I'll walk out about 10 yards in front, put the aim rod in the ground at 45 degrees. That's an important point too. If you put the aim rod in the ground straight up and down, and they hit in the lower half of the aim rod, it's coming back at you, right? So always put it in the ground, leaning away from you. Like the physics of that will make sense. Right? So you put the aim rod in the ground, angled slightly away, and say they're just overturning it. Or they're starting it more left than we want. But they're making a pretty good internal hip turn. They're turning into their right hip socket on the backswing that I want them to. And so the compression's there, but they haven't quite matched up picture and face. Then I'll put that aim rod just slightly left of target, and I'll tell them it's an oak tree. And I was like, it's an oak tree. If you hit the oak tree, it's coming back and hitting you in the head. So I'm giving them the picture. I will be extremely descriptive if possible. I'll paint the picture for them and then let them react. And invariably, if you tell someone there's an oak tree right in front of them, they're not going to hit it. Sounds too easy, I know, but that's true. Like, I remember as a junior golfer, like, I have a vivid memory playing on this little 9-hole course we grew up on. On the third hole, I hit the shot down the right, and there's a tree 10 yards in front of me, and the flagstick is like 150 yards, but directly in front of the tree. And I remember the pro at the club had told me about paths and face. And he's like, you got to aim the club face at the target and then swing around, right? This is 1980s. Okay, right? So, and I'm looking, never forget this moment. And the tree's in front of me. The flag's behind it. I'm going to hit the tree. So I just aimed right and hooked it around the tree. But the point being, you don't hit the tree. No one hits the tree. They put a tree in front of them, right? But paint the picture. And if you have to go to the trees, go to the trees. Put them in the trees, right?
Just a follow-up with the picture stuff that you're asking them to do at home. Is that picture part of their game plan?
It's a great question. I love that. So is the picture part of the game plan at home? Yes. And it's in the gym too. I'm a big believer in patterning, doing gym exercises, making sure the body's functionally possible to do the moves that I want that player to do. I want them in the gym. If there's an exercise that somewhat resembles the exercise that what we're trying to do in their swing, I want them thinking golf swing and shot. Because if not, like, good job, you're getting your glutes stronger. Maybe there's some like lack of glute activation on the right side. And if you do all the glute exercise and do all the bridge work and all that stuff, you're really strong. You need to think about the golf swing at the same time. So yeah, absolutely. I tie them together as much as humanly possible.
Question, Sean? Anybody else? Ryan?
Tim, again, thank you so much for this. I have a bunch of questions here.
We can do that too. Could be later for it's fine.
I'm also somebody that teaches a lot of junior golfers. I know that you still spend a lot of time in that space as well as the more high-end players. Going back to the very beginning of the conversation, you mentioned trying to deliver the product to that person. So one of the things that I run against right now is having 30, 40 junior golfers that are all trying to compete at whatever level or level up to whatever their next level is. A lot of that, especially in the 13 to 16 range, a lot of that is a lot of practice plans, a lot of work on our end. How do you kind of put that together as like a product for them in terms of, is it just on your own time, or is it just part of your hour lesson, or is there like a coaching package that you present?
So my coaching packages and how I like build that out relative to junior players, because of my schedule in terms of where I am and volume of players, I actually don't do a straight coaching package anymore for juniors. And reason being, I used to. The reason I actually don't do that anymore because the other players are taking so much of my time that I was having issues. No one actually ever complained, thankfully, but ethically, morally for me, I was charging X number of dollars for this coaching package and I was struggling to like deliver the product that I had said. So I've lost PGA Tour players because of lack of access. So that wasn't going to happen again. So when I was doing that, I would create very holistic packages and charge by semester and I'd build in like on-course observation time to that, or tournament observation time to the package. And that was it's very successful.
It's like what he could do right now. Mm-hmm. Think about where you were.
Yeah. Like I think the one thing that was most successful and helped me the most at that point when you had the 30 to 40 juniors and like you're trying to manage them all is if you can go observe some tournaments.
And you charge them for that.
And you charge them for that.
Yeah.
That is not free. Right? It's like your time is your time that you're now not spending with your family. So I believe in billing for that type of thing. And I will say when you're building in practice plans, and to me, a practice plan is part of coaching a high-level player. That is what it is. That's part of the rate no matter what, in my opinion. I think if you're teaching a high-end player and you don't do a practice plan, I think you're doing a misservice. You're not serving them correctly. I think it's complete disservice to the player.
You're just building that, like let's just take the practice plan as an example. That's just built into your lesson.
Yep.
And then it would be kind of the same as if you are working with Tim, you're going to, I spend a lot of time, I totally agree, relationship and communication being like at the top of a pyramid, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I spent a lot of my time in my Instagram DMs, just like all day long, all night long, all these kids talking to them, and to the point where like my wife's like,
Yeah.
Welcome to being successful. It doesn't change.
do you still have that issue?
One of the ways I filter that is that 90% of my like lessons or videos that get sent to me are on Coach Now. I can knock it out in a block of time on the follow-ups. I don't give out my cell phone number. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But I don't give out my cell phone number unless there's a certain level of relationship there. Lessons, unless you're a pro, and some college kids, all get set up on email. So then I like can block my day. Like I can do emails at lunch. I can schedule then, and I have to plan out my day.
Sorry.
It's okay. Keep going.
Like a lot of my kids that I'm having more success at 2 or 3 hour blocks of time with them versus like, my days are still like back. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like it gives me a little bit more patience. Like I'm not just gonna like rip through whatever I need to get done in 60 minutes. Is that something that you do for a younger, the 12 to 16, or are they still taking hour lessons?
So vast majority of those lessons, I have a few kids who I'll see on an hour basis, but that's a long relationship with that developing kid. So it's like, what do you need to do? Hit it, go. And we move on quickly. The vast majority of my lessons are 2 hours I can take my time. They can take their time. Maybe more importantly, they can you can give the student, that player in front of you, time to process the information, and you can get some wonderful conversations going in that, and you can like almost pull out of them what they really need to work on.
Plus you can work on multiple skills.
Yep.
Which I think
So I would, the vast majority of my sessions are 2 hours.
Yeah.
And therefore, I sell out my days extremely quickly. And hence why it's hard to... I'll turn down a lot of lessons. I'm not good at it, but I'm getting better at saying no. I'm still not good at that. But I do have to say no. So now one of the no's is I don't work with anybody under 12. There's just no time. And this Marcus Hunt, one of the guys on my staff, he's incredible at that age group. So like... they should go to him. He'll do a better job because he's with that population a lot. 12 is, I'm not sure I have anyone who is 12 right now. God, I hope not. But 12 is my number. Yeah.
Great question. Anybody else? Good.
You've used the words teaching and coaching tonight. And coaching is definitely a word being thrown around a lot in our industry right now. And I love asking people, in your opinion, what's the difference between teaching and coaching?
The difference between teaching and coaching.
Teaching is I'm telling somebody something. I'm providing information to the student in front of me. Coaching there's that part of it. You have to teach first. There has to be the teaching piece of the element. You have to be providing some information. So after you get beyond that, a first session with me, for somebody who's on the PGA Tour or a 12-year-old junior, that's a teaching session. I'm providing information. I talk a lot in a first session. And I tell them, that person, I'm going to talk your ear off. I'm going to talk more in this session than the next two combined. Because I have to tell you something. So that is 100% teaching. It's telling you something. It's providing information and providing a game plan as to how they're going to improve. And then coaching is helping them on the journey of the game plan. Once I have a game plan established, I'm somewhat done with the teaching of new information. I'm now coaching them and helping them and reacting to their feedback as to the game plan we've established and what do we need to adapt or adjust to help them up a level in their golf game. Good question.
Yeah,
thanks.
Great question.
Thank you.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming out for this. Thank you. Tim, thank you so much for the information and
pleasure
for doing this again.
Pleasure to be here.
Everybody give it up for Tim Cooke.
Cheers. Thank you.
What's up, everyone? Guru back here again with a couple of things before you go. First, a big thank you to Tim for coming on the show again in front of a live audience and sharing his knowledge on golf instruction and coaching. Please give him a follow on Instagram and Twitter at Tim Cooke Golf, and that's Cooke with an E. Also, I have a call of action to you. I would love to hear from you, and if you enjoy the show, DM me, let me know your takeaways from this episode or any of the other episodes. And then also, who would you like to see on the show in the future? Give me some names. Give me some people that you would love to hear from. Also, give me a follow and reach out to me on Twitter or Instagram at Golf Guru TV. That's at Golf Guru TV. I appreciate a follow. If you have a question or a comment, you can also email the show at golfgurushow@gmail.com. Or like I said, hit me up on the DM. Music for this episode was brought to you by Kevin MacLeod and Zach Mullett. Also, a huge shout out to Joel North for his incredible editing and production work on this episode and then all future episodes that will be coming your way. So as I always leave you with my mantra that I subscribe to from the late, great Jim Rohn: study, practice, teach, and then pass it on. Thanks so much for listening. I will talk to you next time.